Well, good morning and welcome to Conversations with Rotary Action People for Friday, July 10th, 2020. My name is Donald Hovis with the CWRAP Rotary Club here in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Today is all about books that can talk. Yes, books can talk, with Mr. Brian Juluis with Speaking Books from the Rotary Club of Hilton Head Island. Good morning, Brian.
Hi, Donald. How are you?
Doing wonderful. Thank you for being with us today. To get us started, I will do the vision statement of Rotary. Together, we see a world where people unite and take action to create lasting change across the globe, in our communities, and in ourselves. Now I will go around here and introduce a few key dignitaries on the call today. Past District Governor from the Rotary Club of Mount Pleasant, Mr. Lou Mello. Good morning, Lou. Past District Governor from the Rotary Club of Hilton Head Island, Mr. David Terrard and his wife, Susan. Past Rotary International Vice President. She's got her computer working today. We can see her with her Gamecock hat on. The lovely Miss Ann Matthews. Good morning, Ann. Let's see. Our current District Governor from the Rotary Club of Myrtle Beach, Miss Pauline Levesque. Good morning, Pauline. Our District Governor-elect from the Rotary Club of Hilton Head Island, Mr. Paul Walter. Good morning, Paul. Our Public Image Chair for our Rotary District, Miss Mary Gask. And our District Communications Chair from the Somerville Evening Rotary Club, Mr. Terry Moore. And I think, if I'm wrong, please forgive me, but I believe past District Governor Kay Davis is on the line here too. So good morning there, guys. Thank you for being with us. And maybe that is District Foundation Chair Paula Matthews right there, possibly. I see Paula on there. So Brian, thank you for being with us. I know I'm excited to learn about Speaking Books. You have sent me several questions over. And before I get started, if you're joining us today in the chat box, please place your Rotary Club, where you're watching from. Also over on the Facebook page, please put your Rotary Club and where you're watching from. Okay, Brian, so I think we all want to know, what is a speaking book?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. I appreciate being invited to come and talk about the books. And, to kick off with, I think, we're all very familiar with prescription medicine. And, here's one which simply says, take one tablet by mouth twice daily, which is fine. We all take literacy for granted. We understand exactly the instructions. But think of people who are illiterate or semi-literate. They're 12 to 18 times more likely to misunderstand the instructions with disastrous results. So we created the Speaking Book, which was really to bridge the communication gap. And this was to ensure that the message is always seen, read, heard, and understood. We came up with a hardcover book, very well written, with messaging, well illustrated, and a soundtrack. The soundtrack in, whatever the appropriate language. And then you press a button. Very simply, you'd say, press a button, and it would read to you.
This is Leland Dube here, talking to you and your friends about passion.
And that's how it all started, with the first Speaking Book. So, looking at what we've done, I'd love to be able to say, well, we obviously had a lot of research into the problems with low literacy and how we were going to solve it, and we came up with the design of a speaking book. But unfortunately, I certainly can't claim that. Instead, the credit for coming up with the speaking book has to be my wife, Zane, who, as the founder of SADAG, which is the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, which is Africa's largest mental health support group. And at the moment, they are fielding something like 1,400 crisis calls a day as a result of the lockdown and the pandemic. But back in 2003, Zane won an award from the World Bank, and there was a small little plaque like this, but it came with a very large check. And the check was towards the teen suicide prevention program that SADAG were running in South Africa. Typically, Zane's staff would go out to the schools and talk to the kids and leave them material, leaflets, brochures, and so on to try and explain what they should do if they recognize anybody that had the symptoms or possibly would commit suicide. Suicide, as you'll appreciate, is the third biggest killer of young people in South Africa. But what they were finding instead was that the kids were taking no notice at all of the written material. It all got discarded. So they had to come up with something fast to get their attention. And Zane came up with the idea. She said, what about those books that Disney used, you know, with dogs barking and cows mewing to show little kids and get them to understand, you know, early stages of recognizing things and also learning to recognize the alphabet. So she was in South Africa at the time. I was here in the States. And she said, why don't you go to China and work out something? I said, rubbish, I don't need to go to China. I'll just call Disney and find out who does their material for them. And it turns out that it's a company called PIL in Chicago. So I phoned them and they said, yes, you can come and talk to us. I fly up to Chicago, and it was a wonderful meeting. I think they kept me waiting an hour. And finally, I got to meet the vice president, who was totally uninterested. And he said, yes, well, we could do something like this with you. It'd take about 6 months to put something together. And the costs were enormous. And also, we wouldn't dream of doing anything like less than 50,000 as a minimum order. So with that, I started searching around using the Chinese equivalent of Google. I connected with a company, and very shortly I was in China. And I then met May, and she looked about 16 years old at the time. And would you believe, within a week, we had designed every aspect of the speaking book. And we designed the thing, we worked out how it was going to work, how we could do the soundtracks to extend them for a length of time. We got the sound system sorted out and so on, and we were off and running. And shortly thereafter, we launched the first book, which was Suicide Shouldn't Be a Secret. And that's it there. By luck or good judgment, we got a number of things right. First of all, you'll notice it's a very large size book, and that was deliberate. That was done so that they couldn't be hidden and they couldn't be put in someone's pocket or case or whatever. People would see them. And in Africa, you carry something colorful like that around, people are going to come up and want to know what you got there. So it sort of publicized what we were doing. Then we wrote a very good story. We also had the sense to get a well-known narrator, somebody who was loved by the community, who was on TV, on radio, a woman called Lillian Dubé. Everybody knew Lillian. And she did the first book for us. This was going to be just a one-off. We worked out that we'd probably, if we could get just 5 users per book, this whole thing would be justified. In actual fact, a while later, there was research that was conducted either by De Beers or Pfizer into our speaking book, and we found that we were getting an average of 27 users per book. Later on, UNICEF conducted a major research study in Ethiopia and found that we're getting an average of 120 users per book. So an enormous impact, huge numbers of people. After we did that book, I thought, well, that's it. I can go back to trying to learn how to play golf and I wouldn't be pestered again. In fact, the book was such a phenomenal success that word quickly spread. And with that, we started getting one inquiry after another. And we started doing work for some of the pharmaceuticals in things, messaging that they wanted to get across. So we carried on doing a number of books. And from those early days, I can say now, we have done something like 100 different titles. We have worked in about 40 different languages. We've at least 35 different countries. And the success of that book can be seen by the sort of people we work with. We have all the top 10 pharmaceutical companies. Now, bear in mind, they're not using these books to sell a drug or promote anything they're doing. That's something totally against what we at Speaking Books believe. These books have to be promoting good health, good practices, and so on. And so we have most of the pharmaceuticals who've done it for things like people to understand what safe medicine is about, what mental health is about, what healthy eating is all about. And then we've worked with most of the major NGOs. UNICEF are huge clients of ours. As of, we have Catholic Relief Services, we have Save the Children, we have Sesame, and so on. And of course, Rotary International, which we'll come on to a bit later. The other thing with the speaking book is that they can never be sold. So when we do a speaking book, they always have to be handed out free to the community, which means we have to have a sponsor, often with deep pockets, to make sure that thousands of these books can be sent out. And so, you know, over the years, this is what we've been very successful in achieving. And I think the next thing that would be of interest was that an area we got into, which is very relevant today. A few years back, in fact, probably 10 years ago or more, Pfizer came to us and said, could these books be used for clinical trials? Now, clinical trials have to be conducted for every time a medicine or a procedure is going to be released to the public. And which is fine in a country like this, that when somebody joins a clinical trial, they understand exactly their rights, their obligations, the privacy, and all the things that go with a clinical trial. But if it's a low literacy community, they've got to know what the informed consent is all about. And that is where a speaking book has been used over and over again. It has been supported and endorsed by the World Medical Association. And we have done dozens of these books to support clinical trials in a variety of countries. In fact, right at the moment, we're doing clinical trial books for both Pfizer and Novartis for a whole series of studies here in the States, Middle East, India, and Africa. I think it was about 9 years ago and 1 month, I became a Rotarian. And our club, the Hilton Head Rotary Club, is a large club. We have around 150 members and a large dining room. And being new to it, I sort of kept a low profile and used to try and sit at the back of the room, hoping nobody would notice me. I'd only been there a little while, and this Bernie Rydell comes up to me and says, "Hey, new boy, these speaking books that talk to people, do you think they could actually be of any use for our program with polio, educating people about polio and vaccines?" And I said, "You know, Bernie, that's a brilliant question. Yes, of course." Well, within a very short time, he had got me in front of Ann Matthews and Nancy Barbie. He said, "These are the people who make things happen. You've got to meet Ann and see what she thinks of the speaking book idea." I go to meet Ann, and she says, "Yes, this definitely seems to have relevance to what we're doing. Let me introduce you to the people who make it happen. The heavyweights in Evanston who run the polio program, people like Rocky and so on." And so, of course, I followed up with them, and what's the speaking book? Do you think it'll work? And they then said, "Well, we've got a big program going at the moment and a problem in Pakistan. And Aziz Mamon, who I think is now director as well of Rotary on the board, he's the man. Why don't you talk to him?" So I get hold of, I email him and he comes back immediately. He says, don't know what the hell you're talking about. What is a speaking book? So at great cost, I FedEx him one. And 2 days later, I get a call from him. Brian, you're on. Let's do it. He's partnered, and I think as you all know, we partner with UNICEF on the Rotary polio program. And UNICEF jumped on this as well. And they said, tell you what, we will give you the artist and we'll give you all the messages. We'll help you write the book, which they did. And a few months later, we delivered the very first book, which I think I've got here somewhere. Yeah, here we are. This was our first book that we did on polio. It is a story of health. I don't know if you can hear it. And illustrated by and this was UNICEF's contribution. We did this book in Urdu and Pashto, and it was an extremely successful book. So much so that UNICEF told their people running the Nigerian program about how well they were doing the book, and why don't they look at doing something like that? What happened then was the lady in charge of polio in Nigeria, she was in a hurry to get this done, and she went straight to Sir Emeka Offa. Sir Emeka, I don't know if any of you have met him or know him, a multi-billionaire. He is a philanthropist. He is also a huge supporter of Rotary. And she had a meeting with him, which I think lasted all of about 10 or 15 minutes. And he said, what do you need? And she said, we want to do 15,000 books. No problem, he said. See my secretary, Rosalind, she'll give you a check. And that was it. We were off and running. The only thing was they were going to try and have the books done in time for World Polio Day, which was 3 months away. Now, can you imagine writing a book, illustrating a book, recording a book, and delivering a book all in 3 months? But that was a challenge, and we did it. It was a fabulous book, and we got the book out there. It's, I think I've got, yeah, here we are. Yes to health, no to polio. The only thing is, these books were being distributed in the northern part of Nigeria, heavily influenced and controlled by the Muslim leaders, and Rotary and UNICEF kept saying, if we're going to do the books, we really need the approval of the Muslim community. And they kept telling me, oh yeah, we got the approval, they've told us we can go ahead. And I said, yeah, verbal approval is wonderful, but how about something in writing? Because it'll count a lot more. Well, we got on with the production. We got 15,000 books done. We still had nothing from the Muslim leaders saying, yes, we endorse this book. 15,000 books were all packed in boxes, ready to ship, when I got a call from Nigeria saying, right, they've agreed, here is their logo, they want it on the book. And I said, well, wait a minute, we've just done 15,000 books. So I phoned May in China and I said, look, May, we got a bit of a problem here. They need their logo. She said, well, why don't I print 15,000 gold stickers with the logo and put them on the book? I said, yeah, but you've packed 15,000. It took them exactly 48 hours to do the stickers, unpack the books, put the stickers on, repack the books, and get the whole lot off to the shipping. We also had to air freight about 200 or 300 books for the World Polio Day. They all arrived within 2 days to spare. So that was an amazing an event. The other incredible thing from that was UNICEF was so thrilled with it, they ordered another 30,000 books to promote immunization. Then the other major program we've done with Rotary has been our children coping with cancer. And this was something And here again,
it can be really scary to be in a hospital, to stay in a strange place.
This was an initiative that we put together with our club, and it was very much a club event in terms of that the club helped write it, and we then used 2 young children to record the book. So we got a 10 and 11 totally in getting the distribution. So we get the books out through Rotary clubs throughout the states to the various cancer wards for children. Been phenomenally successful. Book itself was endorsed by the World Medical Association, and we funded this personally as well as with Rotary. So those are the type of things we got involved in. More recently, we're actually doing a book now on coronavirus, and that we're actually recording it today. It's going to be a book we're going to use in South Africa, which is going to be in Xhosa and in English. But really, and that's something Zane and I are funding, to show what is possible, to explain to people what coronavirus is about and how to stay safe. That book will be used as a demonstration throughout Africa and also over here as what is possible. So that really is, in a nutshell, the type of things we're doing. Wherever possible, we work with local communities, we work with major organizations, as I say, UNICEF and so on, in creating these books that go out into the community. One of the things we got out of UNICEF, the book we did for Afghanistan, oh, I should have mentioned that. We had another book we did for Afghanistan, which also a polio book. That's Grandpa Knows Best, A Story of Polio. They recorded it, and they even included music with theirs, and sounds of chickens and ducks and everything else in the background. But as a result of that book, UNICEF had shown it around a lot in Afghanistan, and we then got a large award from UNES, which is the United Nations Mine Action something or other. So we're about to deliver to them a huge consignment of books explaining to children in the 2 languages, Pashto and Dari, on how to stay safe or keep away from landmines. So as I say, that in a nutshell is the type of things we're doing, 100 different titles. And, you know, currently we're working with about 12 different books in production at the moment this year. So, you know, hopefully that's enough to give you an idea. And any questions or anything you want to follow up with, Donald?
Well, thank you very much, Brian. I know you sent me 8 questions over to ask you, and you answered every one of them in that presentation right there. So thank you for doing that. I know you had a few people that you had come on that you would like to introduce that are on here.
Well, there's Janine, I can see in the background. And Janine is the writer is the person who's responsible for doing the storylines for most of our books. And the amazing thing with Janine is we can give her the most complicated information, say from Pfizer on clinical trials, and in 24 hours, we got the first draft of the book. Venetia, who is one of the people who helped running the SADAG organization in South Africa and very much involved, particularly now, with having to do, you know, so much remote counseling and having to organize a lot of their counselors working from home because they're not allowed to work from the office. I see James Gartside, who he and I, believe it or not, went to college together. And yes, we both got a degree. So, and of course, my wife, Zane, is on as well. And you all know Bernie.
And I did want to say that when I was doing my introductions, I forgot 2 people, so I will introduce them now. Past District Governor from the Rotary Club of Hilton Head Island, who has now been mentioned for the 3rd time, Mr. Bernie Rydell. Good morning, sir. And then District Governor-elect nominee from the Sea Island Rotary Club in Beaufort, Mr. Bob Gross. Good morning, Bob. So, Brian, I do have a few questions for you.
Right.
From the audience here. And the first one is, do you have a book on bullying?
Yes. We did a book in South Africa, and in fact, we reprinted it, and we again involved Rotary in that, we put the Rotary logo on as well. And this was done in South Africa, going out to school children, and really on how to recognize bullying, what to do about it, and so on, and how children should be role models, and particularly the older children should be role models for the younger children. But yes, we've done, and it was a large book order that we did.
And you mentioned it a little bit ago, but can you reiterate the book you're doing for COVID or coronavirus?
We have just written it, and that one, as you'll appreciate, not an easy book to write, because everything is changing so rapidly, and the various protocols. But yes, the book has been written, it's been reviewed by a number of people, and we're going to get it out there. And no doubt by the time it's printed, a lot of the information will have to be updated. But we needed to show there are some basic things with the hand washing, face masks, social distancing, and so on. So we're trying to get those messages across.
Are your books distributed in the United States?
Yes. This book here, Children Coping with Cancer, that was, we've done a lot. Those been distributed. We have just had delivered into the country, I think last week, it was to Pfizer. They're doing clinical trials on, I think it's an RSV drug. And that was a book to explain people to their rights and obligations. That's done in Spanish and in English. We did another book on hypertension here in the States, which was for the South Asian community, particularly those coming across and then suffering from going from their local cuisine that they're used to eating hamburgers and hot dogs here and having terrible problems with high cholesterol.
Is the Chinese versus United States situation right now causing any issues for you?
No, it hasn't. And, we were worried, particularly on shipping, that we thought that would be a holdup, but no. It's been fine. We've had no issues at all. I know there's a lot of questions about China and the way they operate and so on, but the fact is we would not be able to do these books if it wasn't for the factories we work with in China. Their response is immediate. Their deliveries are phenomenal. We couldn't get that service anywhere else. So, it's just a fact of life. They are so keen to do business and they're so efficient.
And let's see. Is the bullying book possibly available in the United States?
It's not totally relevant, because you'll appreciate every book we do is culturally appropriate. So the design, the people, the backgrounds, they're very much for the country. The messaging is very similar, but it'd be quite easy to adapt or redo a book. I mean, for Rotary, it'd be like, if you say something, see something. And, following the program we've been running here.
And then I have a request here, Brian, and I think this is a very worthy request, is if you could you can send it to me, you can send it to Mary, you can send it to both me and Mary.
Okay.
A complete list of your books.
Right.
So that we could share this on our webpage for the district, possibly get that on our social media for the district. I do see that you have a website. It's speakingbooks.com.
That's correct, yes. But I will update the the book list and send it to you. Yeah.
And then let's see. There is a comment here that someone would love to see an American bullying book.
We would love to do one. It's really a simple process. We just need to have the sponsor. The other very important thing with all our books, when we do them, is how the distribution is going to happen. And that's why when we work with Rotary here, we knew our cancer books would get out there because the Rotary clubs all came together, and a lot of the Rotarians were then visiting the hospitals. UNICEF has been a phenomenal partner because they have thousands and thousands of what they call VCMs, volunteer community mobilizers, who actually visit the community, and they take the books with them. So we always know the books are going to be listened to and be seen by the community.
And are there any other topics you might want to produce post-COVID-19?
Well, I think one thing that is bound to happen with the COVID, there are a lot of vaccines that are in development at the moment. And before a vaccine can actually be pronounced safe and go into distribution, they have to go through clinical trials. Now, it's one thing doing a clinical trial here, but you're going to have to do a clinical trial in every country where the vaccines are going to be distributed. Because as you'll appreciate, vaccine is not one size fits all. It might work here okay. It's not going to work, say, in Nigeria or in China. So their clinical trials are carried out in each of those population groups. And to do the clinical trials, you've got to have informed consent that people signing up must know what they're getting into. And that's where our speaking books have worked extremely well. Once they've done that and a vaccine has been passed, I think we're going to have the same challenges as we've had with the polio vaccines. We're going to have to tell people why they need a vaccine, why it's safe, why they can rely on it. So I think, again, we have a tremendous role to play with communicating to local people why they should trust the vaccine.
Do you have any books on diversity?
I think we've touched on a lot of that in South Africa, because as you'll appreciate, we get a lot of feedback in South Africa from my wife's organization, SADAG. And so, yes, very often we have in some of the books on the bullying and things like that, we definitely touch on those things.
And I think the last question I have for you is, what does a book cost, and how long does the battery last, if you know?
Well, just to give you an indication, this book, done for Pfizer, what it means to be part of a clinical trial, was created in 2008.
What is research? Research is how we try to learn answers to questions about medicine.
And it is still going. The batteries, typically, we get about 60 to 100 complete plays on a book. And that means the batteries, usually good for 2-3 years. Batteries are easy to replace. We have a design now that we just use 2 AAA batteries. They can be found anywhere. With big orders, we usually supply a whole backups, free batch of batteries, so they've got them if they need them, with the baby screwdrivers that we use. And as I say, the cost of the book varies enormously on quantity. We try not to do small runs. They're very expensive for us to do, but typically an economical batch size starts at 2,000 or 3,000 books. Our biggest one to UNICEF was 45,000 books in one order. And the books run, from $15 down to $9, $10, depending whether they're bilingual or single language.
Excellent information today. Thank you, Brian. This was
My
super
pleasure.
informative. Very, very informative. So thank you for your time. And we appreciate those guests who joined us today as well, that were here for you. And also you Rotarians, we do appreciate you joining with us today. Do you know we do this 3 times a week? Mondays at 11 o'clock, Wednesdays at noon is our new all-club conference call. We invite you to join next Wednesday. And then we also do these on Fridays at 11 a.m. I'll ask you to mark Friday 2 weeks from today at 11 o'clock. We want that on your calendar. If you were on this call earlier before 11 o'clock, we were talking about this gentleman. Mr. John Nanny, who is a polio survivor, will be doing the CWRAP segment that day. So please join us on the 24th. Mary Gask has been working really hard on filling up our schedule with fantastic speakers just like you, Brian. So thank you again for your time.
My pleasure. Well, thank you all. I appreciate you listening.
Thank you. And to conclude, I will do the Rotary 4-way test. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Hope everyone has a wonderful Friday and a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday at 11 o'clock for the next Conversations with Rotary Action People. That's a wrap. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks.